In the spring of 334 BCE, a young and ambitious Macedonian named Alexander crossed the Hellespont at the head of a multi-ethnic army, carrying dreams that stretched beyond the boundaries of the known world. Alexander the Great, as he would come to be known, had set his sights on the east and the seemingly invincible Persian Empire. Alexander III, king of the Kingdom of Macedon, was born on July 20, 356 BCE, but Alexander's intellectual development was primarily influenced by his tutor, the philosopher Aristotle, whom his father had invited to Macedon. For 3 years, Aristotle taught him ethics, logic, rhetoric, science, and philosophy, instilling in him a love for knowledge and wisdom. Alexander, at the age of 20, ascended to the throne and inherited his father's dream of conquering the Persian Empire. Upon hearing about Philip's assassination, Antipater, the regent of Greece, raised an army to punish those responsible. Soon, the entire Persian army joined the fight, attacking in waves. Once again, Alexander's force was outnumbered, but he made a brilliant tactical decision to attack immediately, preventing Darius' army from fully forming. To quell the uprising, Alexander marched through Mesopotamia, defeating Autophrates and subduing the rebellious satraps. Alexander, standing before the ruins of Persepolis, symbolized the end of an era. However, his journey through the Middle East had a profound impact on him, fostering tolerance and respect for other cultures. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to show your support. Your support means everything to us. See you in the next video. He founded numerous cities, including Alexandria in Egypt, and promoted cultural exchange between Greece and the East. Despite his many accomplishments, Alexander's story didn't end here. He continued his campaign eastward, reaching the Beeka Valley in northern India and defeating King Paris. However, his troops, exhausted after years of campaigning, refused to go further. Alexander, deeply affected by his soldiers' weariness, decided to return home. On the way, he visited the oracle of the temple at Siwa and was declared the son of Zeus Ammon, further solidifying his divine mandate to conquer. His next objective was Babylon, where he spent the winter of 331 BCE planning the final campaign against the Persians. Early in 331, Alexander's army encountered the main Persian force under Darius at the Battle of Gaugamela, where he achieved one of his greatest victories. Darius deployed a massive army, possibly numbering over 200,000 men, attempting to overwhelm the Macedonians. However, Alexander countered the Persian numerical superiority by maneuvering his cavalry to outflank the Persian center and rear. As Darius fled, his army crumbled, giving Alexander complete control over the Persian Empire. In the ensuing battle, Alexander's cavalry routed the Persian chariots, allowing his infantry to break through the center of the Persian lines. Darius, abandoning his throne and treasure, fled the field, inadvertently leaving his family behind, whom Alexander treated with respect and returned to Persia. Despite his untimely demise, Alexander left an enduring legacy. He had reshaped the political and cultural landscape of the ancient world, forging a new era of Hellenism that blended Greek and Eastern cultures and laid the foundation for the spread of Greek civilization throughout the Middle East. The decisive victory at Issus marked a turning point in Alexander's campaign, opening the door to the fertile regions of Syria, Phoenicia, and Palestine. After consolidating his gains in the area, Alexander sailed to Egypt in 332 BCE, where he was proclaimed pharaoh. He founded the city of Alexandria, which quickly became a major hub of trade and culture, and spent a year resolving local issues before returning to continue his campaign against the Persians. The Macedonian line wavered, but ultimately held. Alexander, leading a cavalry charge, broke through the Persian center, slaying Memnon and forcing the remaining Persians to retreat. The victory at the Granicus was important for several reasons. First, it proved that Alexander's army could defeat a much larger force through discipline, training, and strategy. Secondly, it demonstrated Alexander's exceptional military skills and leadership. And thirdly, it opened up the rest of Anatolia to the Macedonian conquest. Following the battle, Alexander campaigned throughout Asia Minor, subduing cities and establishing Macedonian control over the region. By 333 BCE, he had taken Gordium, the capital of the Phrygian kingdom, and had advanced to the Cilician Gates, a mountain pass leading to the Persian heartland. However, he soon discovered that the culprits were Macedonians loyal to Philip, not the Greeks. Antipater, suspicious and fearful of losing power, gathered allies in Greece to oppose Alexander, who responded by marching west with his army. At the Mardonius, Alexander's brother, Eurydamus, defected to Antipater, but the majority of troops remained faithful to Alexander. Antipater eventually recognized the futility of resisting and agreed to share power with Alexander. His father was King Philip II of Macedon, while his mother, Olympias, was the daughter of Neoptolemus I of Epirus. In early 334 BCE, he led his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor, where they clashed with the Persian governor of Lydia. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's disciplined troops defeated the Persians, securing a Macedonian foothold in the region. News of this victory reached King Darius III of the Persians, who assembled a massive army to stop Alexander's advance. Darius divided the task of defeating the Macedonians among 3 generals, 2 of whom, Memnon and Amyntatus, met Alexander's forces at the river Granicus. Alexander's army was smaller, numbering around 40,000 foot soldiers and 7,000 horsemen. However, it was well-trained and equipped, with a battle-hardened corps of veterans who had fought alongside Philip in Chaeronea. On the Persian side, the army comprised between 80 and 100,000 men, but little is known about their composition and training. We can assume, however, that like most Persian armies, they were a mix of infantry, cavalry, and chariots drawn from the various nations under Persian rule, each contributing their unique fighting style and weaponry. He betrothed him to a Persian princess, hoping to secure an alliance with the empire. This marriage never took place, however, because in 340 BCE, Philip initiated the Third Macedonian War against the Greeks, aiming to subjugate the rebellious city-states. While Philip led the campaign in the west, Alexander commanded the cavalry on the eastern front, gaining valuable military experience. In 338 BCE, the war ended with the Battle of Chaeronea, where the Macedonian phalanx proved invincible, crushing the Athenian Theban coalition led by Thebes' famed general, Epaminondas. With Greece subdued, Philip turned his attention to the east, eager to conquer the Persian Empire. He assembled a large and diverse army that reflected the character of Alexander's reign. This army was composed of 8 infantry units, 7 cavalry regiments, and 2 elite formations, the Companions and the Royal Guard. Among these units were infantry phalanxes armed with long spears and shields, companion cavalry armed with lances and swords, light infantry equipped with javelins and bows, and a small contingent of heavy cavalry wearing protective clothing and wielding spears and swords. The heart of the army was the companion cavalry, hand-picked elite soldiers who followed Alexander directly. These men were fiercely loyal and formed the backbone of his cavalry force, often deciding battles with their bravery and skill. Although he belonged to the royal family of the Argead dynasty, his ancestry is uncertain. Some historians claim descent from the mythical figure of Achilles, while others link him to the local chieftains of the region. From a young age, he demonstrated qualities that foretold his future greatness. Intelligent, curious, and ambitious, he loved hunting and riding horses and developed a passion for poetry and music. He was well versed in literature, particularly the epics of Homer, which inspired his vision of becoming a great conqueror. But was he really just a fierce warrior with big dreams? What if he was much more than met the eye? Let's find out, but first, welcome to my channel. At the age of 13, his father sent him to the court of King Aetolus of Epirus to receive military training in the art of war. Upon returning to Peller, Philip recognized Alexander's qualities and decided to prepare him for kingship. Philip planned to lead this army against the Persians, but his untimely death in 336 BCE thwarted his plans. With Greece pacified, Alexander prepared for his long-awaited campaign against the Persians. The battle began when the Persian left wing charged across the river, driving back the Macedonian center. Darius III, aware of the threat posed by Alexander, had assembled a massive army at the city of Issus to halt the Macedonian advance. While in Egypt, news arrived of a rebellion in Asia Minor led by the Persian satrap, Autophrates. With the demise of the Achaemenid Empire, the largest state system in ancient history had fallen. Sadly, Alexander never made it back to Greece. He died in Babylon on June 10, 323 BCE, at the age of 32, possibly from malaria or typhoid fever. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Alexander the Great, the name still strikes even after all these years. In today's video, we look at the battle that made him great. But before we begin, let's solve a quiz question. Which of these statements is correct? Alexander the Great defeated King Porus on the banks of the Beas River. B. Alexander the Great defeated the Persian Emperor Darius III on the banks of the river Pison. C. Alexander the Great defeated King Porus on the banks of the river Pison. D. None of the above. His plan is straightforward: to envelop Alexander's smaller force and overwhelm it with sheer numbers. In the center of his army, he places his elite troops, including the Immortals, an elite unit of 10,000 soldiers known for their discipline and prowess in battle. Around them are positioned the cavalry and light infantry, ready to execute Darius's orders. Well, the answer is B. Alexander the Great defeated the Persian Emperor Darius III on the banks of the river Pison. The Persian king, who had planned to encircle and destroy Alexander's force, is now helpless to prevent the Macedonian cavalry from tearing through his ranks. If you've been enjoying the video so far, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Your support means a lot to us and keeps us motivated to create more engaging historical content for you. Instead, he arranges his forces in a crescent formation, leaving a gap between his right and left flanks. It was also a battle of wills, a clash of cultures. On one side was the youthful Macedonian king, ambitious, determined, and full of military panache. On the other was the aging Persian monarch, blinded by pride and overconfidence. This throws the entire Persian army into chaos. Without a clear leader, the troops lose morale and the situation rapidly deteriorates. And so we come to the end of our tale of the battle that made Alexander the Great, a battle where a young king with a small army dared to take on a seemingly invincible foe and won. If you enjoyed this journey through time, we invite you to join us for more adventures. And if you'd like to continue exploring the world of ancient battles and historical tales, consider checking out our other videos. There's always more history waiting to be uncovered. Some flee, abandoning the fight altogether. Others are taken prisoner by the Macedonians. The secret, as history often reveals, lay in Alexander's understanding of his opponent's psychology, his ability to read Darius's moves and exploit his arrogance. When Darius chose to attack, believing his massive army would guarantee victory, Alexander allowed him to do so, knowing it would lead the Persians into a false sense of security and stretch their forces thin. Then came Alexander's masterstroke, the feigning retreat. By pulling his troops to their right flank, he baited Darius into thinking he was in retreat, allowing the Persian cavalry to overextend themselves. And when the moment was ripe, Alexander struck with the force of a thunderbolt, crashing through the overextended Persian lines with his heavy cavalry. Still, others are cut down by the relentless Macedonian swords. It is a complete rout. In response, Alexander shifts his troops to the right, moving away from Darius's center. Meanwhile, the remnants of the Persian army surrender, hoping for mercy from their Macedonian conqueror. Soon, the entire plain of Gaugamela is a scene of celebration and conquest. The once seemingly invincible Persian army, with its hundreds of thousands of soldiers, lies defeated before him. The way to empire is now open and Darius's empire will never be whole again. Now, why would he do this? One might think he's simply trying to avoid the Persian king's elite forces. But there's more to his strategy than that. By retreating to his right, Alexander is actually pulling Darius's forces away from the center, creating a dangerous opening. The Persian cavalry, eager to press their attack, finds itself stretched out along Alexander's right flank, unaware of the trap that's being set for them. This may seem like a risky move, but it's part of Alexander's plan to bait Darius into making the first move. They are unable to move forward due to the tight ranks of the Macedonian phalanx, which easily repels their attacks. So what is Alexander waiting for? With his right flank stretched thin, the Persian cavalry vulnerable, now is the time for action. Suddenly, Alexander makes his move with a well-timed trumpet blast. He leads his heavy cavalry in a swift, direct charge straight toward the weak point in the Persian ranks. His men ride with the precision and speed that has become a hallmark of their military, smashing through the thinly stretched Persian infantry lines. On his right flank, Alexander positions his heavy cavalry under his personal command, ready to strike a decisive blow when the time is right. The rest of his army is composed of infantry armed with long spears and shields, forming a solid, flexible backbone to his force. And if you got this right, please write one word in the comment section, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Let's travel back in time to the year 331 BC. We find ourselves in the plains of Mesopotamia. Stretching out before us is the mighty Persian army, a force so vast it is said to have numbered more than 250,000 soldiers. According to some accounts, they are led by the great King Darius III. At first glance, the army appears impenetrable. It is a sea of warriors equipped with everything from nimble war chariots to fierce cavalry and heavily armed infantry, all set to crush their opponents. So what do we call an army that stretches as far as the eye can see, that fills up the plains like a flood? We could call it an overwhelming army, a massive army, or perhaps an invincible army. In short, a force that seems destined for victory. Yet history tells us of an instance when such an army met its match, not in strength, but in strategy. And who is this opponent? Leading an army no larger than 40,000, yet unafraid of this colossal force, it is Alexander of Macedon, the ambitious young king with dreams of empire. Alexander's army is a mere fraction of the size of the Persian force, yet he does not flinch. Why? Because Alexander knows that battles are not always decided by sheer numbers. Victory can also be a matter of movement, of exploiting the enemy's weaknesses and seizing the right moment to strike. As the two armies face off on the plains of Gaugamela, Darius, confident in his numerical superiority, arranges his troops in a traditional battle formation. What about Alexander? Does he attempt to match the Persians' brute force with force of his own? Not quite. When the battle commences, Darius, eager to crush his opponent, directs his cavalry to charge into the gap in Alexander's ranks. Meanwhile, the bulk of Darius's army remains in the center, held back by the Macedonian infantry. This audacious move catches Darius completely off guard. Let's get back to the video. Now, just as Alexander's cavalry breaks through the Persian lines, news spreads like wildfire that the king has fled the battlefield. As for Alexander, he pursues Darius relentlessly, determined to end the threat posed by the fleeing king. So how did Alexander turn his smaller army into a winning force? What were the key elements of his strategy? It was a stunning display of military brilliance, a testament to Alexander's strategic genius. But it wasn't just about Alexander's tactics. In the end, it was Alexander who emerged victorious, proving that in the realm of warfare, as in life, it is often not the size of your army, but the strategy in your mind that truly counts. In the annals of history, few battles resonate with the same level of significance as the Battle of Gaugamela. This confrontation between Alexander the Great and the Persian king Darius III on October 1st, 331 BC near the Mesopotamian village of Gaugamela would prove to be a monumental clash of civilizations, a showdown that would seal the fate of two empires and redefine the political and cultural landscape of the ancient world. As we delve into the details of this epic battle, it's crucial to understand the stakes involved. His strategy was rooted in a deep understanding of his enemy and a confidence in his own military prowess. Alexander recognized the lack of cohesion within the Persian army, a consequence of its size and the diverse origins of its troops. He personally led his companion cavalry in daring charges, striking at the heart of the Persian army. Initially, he had aimed to rally his troops and turn the tide of the battle in the Persians' favor. Darius III, stripped of his crown and dignity, fled to the city of Bessus. It marked the definitive end of an era, the closing chapter of the Achaemenid Empire's dominance. In its place, Alexander envisioned a new world order, one that would blend Greek and Eastern cultures, fostering a period known as Hellenization. His empire, though short-lived, would have a profound and lasting impact on the ancient world. Gaugamela serves as a stark reminder of the impermanence of power and the inevitability of change. Even the seemingly invincible Persian Empire, with its vast resources and seemingly endless manpower, crumbled in the face of determined opposition and innovative strategy. The battle's legacy resonates through history, shaping the trajectory of civilizations and underscoring the complexities of imperial dominance. The clash between Alexander and Darius was not just a battle, it was a paradigm shift, a moment when the old order gave way to the new. Gaugamela serves as a timeless lesson in the dynamics of power, the allure of ambition, and the enduring impact of one fateful day on the course of history. The echoes of the clash of arms in the plains of Gaugamela continue to reverberate through the corridors of time, reminding us that even in the annals of history, there are moments that stand apart, defining eras and shaping the destiny of civilizations. Among these, the Battle of Gaugamela holds a unique place, a testament to the ambition, strategy, and clash of cultures that defined the ancient world. The legacy of Gaugamela is a tale not just of military conquest, but of cultural fusion, of how the seeds of one empire's demise sowed the roots of another. As we reflect on this epic clash, we're reminded of the intricate tapestry of history, where every thread, every battle, and every leader contributes to the rich and complex narrative of our past. The Battle of Gaugamela wasn't just a moment of conflict. It was a turning point, a pivot that shifted the balance of power and reshaped the cultural landscape of the ancient world. The echoes of the clash of arms and the plains of Gaugamela continue to reverberate through the corridors of time, reminding us that even in the annals of history, there are moments that stand apart, defining eras and shaping the destiny of civilizations. Among these, the Battle of Gaugamela holds a unique place, a testament to the ambition, strategy, and clash of cultures that defined the ancient world. But his own satrap betrayed him, ending his life and seizing the throne. The Persian Empire, already weakened by internal strife, ceased to exist. Its vast territories, once symbols of power and prestige, were absorbed into Alexander's growing empire. Cities like Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, once seats of Persian imperial power, fell without resistance. The Macedonian conquest of the Near East was swift and decisive. Alexander, now styling himself as the King of Asia, blended Greek and Persian administrative systems, ushering in a new era of governance. But with the Macedonian cavalry breaking through the Persian lines and his own guard faltering, Darius realized the gravity of the situation. Fearing for his own safety, he abandoned his efforts to rally his troops and fled the battlefield, hoping to escape to safety. However, his flight demoralized his remaining troops, leading to a general rout. The Battle of Gaugamela was effectively over. The Macedonian forces, energized by their cavalry's success and bolstered by the belief in their king's invincibility, pressed their attack relentlessly. The demoralized Persian army, leaderless and fragmented, offered little resistance. Within a matter of hours, the once mighty Persian forces were in full retreat, abandoning their weapons and their king, utterly defeated. His goal was not merely to defeat the numerically superior Persian forces, but to target their leadership and break their fighting spirit. And then came the decisive moment that turned the tide of the battle in favor of the Macedonians. In a brilliant maneuver known as the hammer and anvil, Alexander used his infantry to hold the enemy in place while his cavalry delivered a crushing blow. The timing was impeccable. Just as the Persian cavalry faltered, Alexander's cavalry struck, catching the disorganized Persian troops off guard. The impact was devastating. The well-coordinated assault of the companion cavalry shattered the enemy formations, sending the Persian troops into disarray. This maneuver was a testament to Alexander's military genius, showcasing his ability to read the battlefield and exploit enemy weaknesses. It marked a turning point in the battle, a decisive shift in momentum that swung the advantage firmly in favor of the Macedonians. He exploited this weakness by avoiding the open field, where the Persians excelled in cavalry charges, and instead maneuvering his troops diagonally across the battlefield. This tactic disrupted the Persian lines, throwing them off balance and creating vulnerabilities that Alexander intended to exploit. Moreover, Alexander's army was battle-hardened, comprising approximately 47,000 veteran soldiers who had fought and won in multiple campaigns. His forces included the legendary companion cavalry, renowned for their shock tactics, and the famed Macedonian phalanx armed with the sarissa, a long spear that gave them unmatched reach in close combat. This combination of elite troops and tactical brilliance formed the bedrock of Alexander's strategy. The Persian Empire under the Achaemenid dynasty had reigned supreme for over 2 centuries. Both sides bore the weight of their respective civilizations on their shoulders. For the Persians, it was a fight to preserve the legacy of an empire that had shaped much of the ancient world. For Alexander and the Macedonians, it was a chance to reshape history and impose their dominance on a weakened but still formidable foe. When the armies finally met, the clash was nothing short of spectacular. The thundering hooves of charging horses, the clash of steel on steel, and the deafening roars of thousands of combatants shook the ground. The Persians, with their emphasis on cavalry, launched a series of fierce charges, attempting to break through the Macedonian lines. Yet Alexander, anticipating these moves, had positioned his troops to counter such attacks. The Macedonian phalanx, standing shoulder to shoulder, formed an impenetrable wall, frustrating the Persian cavalry's efforts. As the cavalry faltered, other Persian troops rained arrows and javelins upon the Macedonians, aiming to disrupt their formations and sow discord in their ranks. Yet Alexander's troops, with their shields raised high, marched forward undeterred, steadily advancing towards the heart of the Persian army. Stretching from the Balkans to the Himalayas, it was the largest and most diverse empire of its time. At its zenith under rulers like Cyrus the Great, Darius I, and Xerxes I, the Persians had developed a sophisticated administrative system that efficiently managed their vast domains. They introduced concepts like satrapies, royal roads, and a standardized coinage, elements that would influence the course of subsequent empires. However, by the time of Darius III, internal strife and satrapal rebellions had eroded the empire's cohesion, paving the way for external threats. Enter Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king who had carved out his own realm in the northern Aegean. His ambitions, however, transcended Macedonia. Victories at the Granicus River and the Battle of Issus against the Persians had thrust him into direct confrontation with the Achaemenids. Gaugamela was the culmination of this conflict, a final stand between two titans of the ancient world. The lead-up to the battle was marked by tension and preparation. Darius, determined to halt Alexander's advance, chose a strategic location for his final confrontation. An open plain near the village of Gaugamela provided ample space for his numerically superior army to maneuver, hoping to wear down the Macedonians and overwhelm them through sheer force. His army was a testament to the vastness and diversity of the Persian Empire. According to ancient accounts, it comprised hundreds of thousands of soldiers drawn from various corners of his dominion. These troops, while lacking in cohesive discipline, boasted an intimidating array of weaponry and tactics. Elite units like the Immortals, a cavalry regiment renowned for its skills and endurance, played a pivotal role in Darius's plans. Their presence alongside heavily armored cataphracts and even scythed chariots showcased the Persians' mastery of cavalry warfare and their ability to project overwhelming power. Furthermore, Darius's reliance on archery and javelin-wielding troops reflected the traditional warfare practices of the Near East, characterized by ranged attacks and psychological warfare. The sheer numbers of the Persian army instilled fear and awe in their adversaries, often causing them to falter before engaging in combat. Alexander, however, was unfazed by the numerical superiority of his opponents. He had faced larger forces before and emerged victorious. As the armies prepared to clash, the stage was set for an epic confrontation. Amidst the chaos of battle, Alexander displayed tactical brilliance. As the battle raged, the presence of King Darius III on the field became a liability. The aftermath of Gaugamela was nothing short of cataclysmic for the Persian Empire. Yet the significance of Gaugamela transcended the mere transfer of power. Alexander the Great was a legendary warrior and conqueror who during his lifetime was feared across the known world. But during his campaign against the Persians, he faced his most formidable opponent yet, their King Darius III. The Persian king had deployed a massive army to confront the Greek invaders, confident that his numerical superiority would secure a swift victory. But this decision undermined his authority over his own people, sending a message that he was not the invincible ruler he had been portrayed as. As Alexander continued his advance into Persia proper, several satrapies, or provinces, either surrendered to him without resistance or switched sides, joining the Macedonian ranks. Darius observed his enemy from a distance, feeling confident that his vast force would eventually tire out the Macedonians, allowing him to exploit any weaknesses that might arise. Seeing their comrades falter, the Persian archers and spearmen on the left flank also began to waver. The once mighty Persian army was in full retreat and his forces were suffering heavy casualties. Accounts from ancient historians tell us that Darius' chariot driver urged him to leave the battlefield immediately, warning that if they stayed any longer, they would surely die. His reputation had been built on numerous military campaigns that resulted in the expansion of the Achaemenid Empire. He was remembered for his victories over the Scythians and the Euxi, as well as his successful defense of the empire's eastern borders. The Battle of Gaugamela was supposed to add another chapter to this illustrious record, but instead it became the defining moment of his failed reign. Some argue that he was a victim of circumstance, trapped by the overwhelming odds and forced to make a desperate attempt at survival. Others contend that his abandonment of his troops and subsequent flight were acts of cowardice that sealed the fate of his empire. Whatever the truth may be, Darius' actions had profound consequences for the ancient world. His flight led to the disintegration of the Achaemenid Empire, opening the way for Alexander's conquest and ushering in a new era of cultural and political exchange between the East and West. Whether viewed as a tragic hero or a coward, Darius' story serves as a reminder of the fragility of even the mightiest empires and the importance of leadership in times of crisis. Other sources claim that Darius believed his army was still strong enough to win the battle and only fled when he saw the true extent of the disaster. But also his wife, Cythera, and his children, who fell victim to the vengeful wrath of Alexander. His flight from Gaugamela served as constant reminder of his weakness, undermining any hopes of a resurgence. In the end, Darius met his demise in the same region where his empire had crumbled. Fearing for his life, he traveled to the oasis of Pella in present-day Turkmenistan, where he was assassinated by one of his own generals, Bessus, who declared himself the new king of Persia. As the Macedonian army advanced through the heartland of the Persian Empire, Darius' authority crumbled before them. Cities fell without resistance and his governors switched sides, eager to avoid the fate of those who remained loyal to him. Even his family, once symbols of the empire's wealth and power, were paraded through the streets of Persepolis as spoils of war. While the exact reason for his retreat remains uncertain, what followed was nothing short of catastrophic. With their lines of communication disrupted and their flanks collapsing, the Persian army started to panic. In a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of battle, Darius ordered a group of elephant riders to charge into the Macedonian ranks. But the elephants were no match for the Macedonian phalanx formation, a tightly packed group of spearmen that had proven invincible in battle. Many elephants were slain, while others retreated back to their handlers, who were then cut down by the pursuing cavalry. However, Alexander was not one to wait for his opponents to make the first move. He used the element of surprise, sending a cavalry unit under the command of his brother, Parmenion, around the Persian flanks. The fleeing soldiers looted whatever they could from their fallen comrades, adding insult to injury. Once the battle was over, Alexander found very few prisoners to take back to Macedonia. The majority of the Persian soldiers had fled or been slain, leaving behind a scene of carnage and devastation. Historian Plutarch wrote that the ground was strewn with the bodies of both friends and foes, so that neither side could tell the difference between the living and the dead. Darius's attempt to rally his troops in person was thwarted by his own men, who either ignored or actively prevented him from doing so. They accused him of purposely leading them into a trap and refused to listen to his commands. Meanwhile, Darius remained stationed in the center, protected by the bulk of his army. The Persian king had made a critical error in judgment, failing to anticipate Alexander's tactics and leaving the flanks of his army undefended. Among them were the satrapies of Babylon, Media, and Lydia, dealing a severe blow to Darius's power and prestige. Despite this, Darius still commanded a formidable force. But he had underestimated the skill and determination of Alexander's Macedonian forces. But as we now know, the battle didn't end in Persia's favor. Instead, it became a decisive turning point in the conflict between the two empires. Gaugamela has been described as one of the largest battles in ancient military history, with some sources claiming that the combined forces of both armies reached 500,000 men. Alexander's Macedonian force consisted of 30,000 heavily armed infantry and 7,000 cavalry, while Darius fielded an army primarily composed of foot soldiers and horse archers, along with war elephants. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's forces were better equipped and more disciplined. His infantry were armed with long spears, swords, and shields, and his cavalry were renowned for their skill and mobility. Darius, on the other hand, relied on the sheer numbers of his army, as well as the unfamiliar terrain, hoping these factors would work in his favor. The battle ended in a humiliating defeat for Darius, who was forced to flee, abandoning his wife and children to the mercy of his enemies. He managed to escape to Susa, a significant city in ancient Persia located in the region of Elam, now part of modern-day Iran. Here, however, his authority over his own people began to crumble as many refused to accept his leadership following such a devastating loss. To make matters worse, Alexander pursued him relentlessly, advancing through the Levant and capturing Tyre in 332 BC, which was a major port city in modern-day Lebanon. The following year, he pushed further east, taking the city of Gaza in Palestine and laying siege to the great city of Babylon. It was here that Darius made a fatal error in judgment that would ultimately seal the fate of his empire. At the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC, Alexander's outnumbered Macedonian forces defeated the vast Persian army, crushing the Achaemenid Empire and bringing about a new era in world history. But while Alexander's tactics and bravery are well documented, the story of what happened to Darius after the battle is less so. Why did the king of the largest empire in the ancient world run away from his own army? And why has this decision caused such debate among historians throughout the ages? To answer this question, we must first turn our attention back to the events leading up to the battle itself. In order to truly understand Darius's actions at Gaugamela, it is important to look at his previous encounter with Alexander at the Battle of Issus in 333 BC instead of confronting Alexander directly and ending the threat once and for all. Darius chose to flee to the east, hoping to raise another army and continue the fight. When Alexander arrived at Gaugamela in 331 BC, the Persian army vastly outnumbered the Macedonians, giving Darius the chance to redeem himself and defend the honor of his empire. The battle commenced with both sides sizing each other up, the Persian army utilizing its numerical advantage to keep the Macedonians at bay. As the Macedonians engaged the Persians in the center, Parmenian's cavalry struck the Persians on the right flank, throwing them into disarray. By this time, Darius realized that the battle was lost. Darius' decision to flee sent a wave of terror throughout the Persian ranks, as his abandonment of the troops demoralized those who remained on the field. This was a far cry from the image of an invincible emperor that Darius had cultivated throughout his reign. In the aftermath of the battle, Darius was forced to flee eastward, abandoning not only his army, though Darius attempted to rebuild his strength and raise another army, his authority was irreparably damaged. In conclusion, Darius' decision to flee the Battle of Gaugamela remains a subject of debate among historians. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Thank you to my supporters for your continued support. The name Alexander the Great evokes images of a nearly unstoppable conqueror, a brilliant military strategist who toppled one of the largest empires in history, all before his 32nd birthday. Yet, behind every great man is usually an even greater story. And Alexander's story began with a small but significant river. The first major battle of Alexander the Great and the first engagement between the armies of Macedon and the mighty Achaemenid Empire, the largest the world had yet seen. The date was May 334 BCE, and the location was the River Granicus in northwestern Asia Minor. This is the story of the Battle of the River Granicus. All soldiers were equal and shared in both the hardship and the glory of war. And they followed Alexander into the fray with unmatched loyalty. As the companion cavalry thundered across the water, their horses' hooves drumming a war song on the water, they broke through the enemy lines. Well, the immediate aftermath of Granicus saw Alexander secure the battlefield and consolidate his forces. He had proven his mettle against the Persians, and now he was ready to reap the rewards of his victory. He pursued the retreating Persians, inflicting further casualties and preventing them from regrouping. Battles like Issus and Gaugamela were not just triumphs of military force, they were tests of endurance and attrition. But what often gets overlooked is the grit and determination that defined his early victories, especially during the protracted sieges and battles that ultimately led to the defeat of the Persian Empire. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Thank you for watching. The tale of the River Granicus, it's not just the story of a great victory, it's the story of a leader who learned the complexities of war, who understood the importance of logistics and strategy, and who showed the world the true meaning of relentless pursuit of excellence. The seeds of greatness were sown in the fertile fields of the River Granicus, watered by the sweat and blood of soldiers and nurtured by the strategic brilliance of a young king. These were conflicts where the outcome was not decided in a day, but was the result of weeks or even months of fighting. During these sieges and protracted battles, Alexander's ability to manage his resources, maintain his army's morale, and adapt to changing circumstances was put to the ultimate test. And it was here, in the crucible of prolonged warfare, that Alexander truly distinguished himself as a military leader of the highest caliber. The art of war is not just about the initial charge, the shock of the first encounter. It's about sustaining an effort over a long period. It's about keeping a diverse coalition of troops together, ensuring they are fed and equipped, and maintaining their morale in the face of adversity. It's about making the right decisions when there is no clear advantage, when victory seems a distant prospect. And it's here in the complexities of long campaigns that Alexander's genius truly shines. At the same time, he took steps to stabilize his position in the region. He negotiated alliances with local chieftains and rulers, securing their support and resources. These measures were not just about extending his dominance. They were about winning the hearts and minds of the people. Alexander understood that a good ruler did not just conquer a territory, but also commanded the loyalty of its inhabitants. His approach was a mix of firmness and leniency, strength and diplomacy, a formula that served him well throughout his campaigns. It was a stunning display of military skill and daring. He seized key cities and strongholds, amassing a fortune that financed his ongoing campaigns. He wanted more. He pressed on to the east, his sights set on the heartland of the Achaemenid Empire. This drive was not a reckless pursuit of conquest, but a calculated strategy aimed at dismantling the Persian war machine. By advancing deep into Persian territory, Alexander disrupted supply lines, forced the enemy to fight on multiple fronts, and gradually eroded Darius III's authority over his fragmented empire. The capture of Sardis, the capital of the Lydian satrapy, proved to be a particularly rich haul. The treasury of Croesus, the legendary wealth of Lydia, became a part of Alexander's spoils. These resources were not just material gains, they were tools of power that allowed him to maintain his army, recruit new soldiers, and keep his vast domain stable. The cavalrymen, heavily armored, wielded long spears and sharp swords, cutting through the Persian ranks like a hot knife through butter. However, the crossing was fraught with danger. Many horses struggled against the current, some even capsizing. But the Macedonians, spurred on by Alexander's example, pushed forward relentlessly. The sight of their cavalry breaking through the enemy lines inspired the infantry to renewed vigor. With their comrades in arms leading the way, the phalangists pushed forward, their shields forming a wall of defense, their long spears thrusting out in unison, reaping a harvest of Persian lives. Slowly but surely, the tide of battle turned. The Persians, taken aback by the ferocity and coordination of the Macedonian attack, began to falter. What had started as a confident stand against the invaders had become a desperate struggle for survival. As the day wore on, the scales tipped definitively in the Macedonians' favor. The once proud Persian army, a symbol of the East's unconquerable might, was on the run. They fled across the Granicus, leaving behind a field littered with the bodies of their slain comrades and a handful of prisoners. For several years prior to the battle, Alexander had been preparing for this war. Their deaths created a leadership vacuum within the Persian ranks, weakening their ability to mount an effective resistance in the region. For Alexander, the victory was not just a triumph over a powerful foe, but a testament to his strategic brilliance and personal bravery. He had dared to cross a raging river, had led his cavalry in a suicidal charge, and had turned the tide of battle single-handedly. To his soldiers, he was not just a king, but a god of war, a demigod who could turn the impossible into reality. This victory was not merely a tactical success, but a strategic and psychological turning point that reshaped the dynamics of the war against Persia. It emboldened Alexander's forces, undermined Persian morale, and demonstrated the young king's military genius. It set the stage for Alexander's subsequent victories and laid the groundwork for his rise to become the ruler of the known world. He had raised and drilled a large army, consisting of a highly trained and disciplined force of Macedonian infantry and cavalry, as well as contingents from his allies, including Greece and Thrace. Meanwhile, the Persians had responded to Alexander's incursions into Asia Minor with their own mobilization of troops. While details are scarce, it is believed that Darius III assembled a force that might have numbered as many as 40,000 to 50,000 soldiers. This army was composed of a variety of troops from different regions of the empire, each with its unique weaponry and tactics. The core of the Persian army was likely made up of infantry, including the elite immortals, a force of 10,000 axe-wielding warriors famed for their discipline and longevity. Alongside them were levies from the satrapies of Asia Minor, armed with spears, bows and arrows, and a variety of cutting weapons. The cavalry was probably drawn mainly from the horse-riding Central Asian tribes and consisted of heavily armored horsemen equipped with lances and swords. As the two armies faced off along the Granicus, the river served as a natural barrier between them. Neither side had yet committed to a full-scale engagement. It was actually the Macedonians who crossed the river. Alexander's plan involved an assault on the Persian camp, but his army had underestimated the strength of the Persian defenses along the river bank. The Macedonian advance quickly came under heavy fire from the Persian infantry and cavalry, forcing them to seek cover behind their own shields. The momentum was clearly with the Persians. As the sun beat down on both sides, the air thick with tension and the smell of sweat and blood, Alexander knew he had to act decisively. and so he called for his companion cavalry to prepare for a daring charge across the river. In the Macedonian army, there was no distinction between officers and men. Amongst the dead were some of the most notable figures of the battle, satraps Bithyadates and General Mithridates. But what happened next? What were the consequences of this battle? What impact did it have on the course of history? Following the battle, Alexander's attention turned to the riches of the Persian Empire. Alexander, however, was not satisfied with just holding on to the territories he had conquered. However, as Alexander marched deeper into the heartland of Persia, the nature of his victories shifted. The legacy of Alexander the Great is often painted in broad strokes: a brilliant warrior conquering vast empires, a visionary leader spreading Hellenistic culture across 3 continents. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving us a like and subscribing for more historical tales.